A woman in Australia left her home and vanished without a trace, leaving her husband and 2 children behind. Relatives tried to get in touch with her, but after a few weeks of failing, they went to the cops. After a review, it was decided that the woman was not in danger and had the right to make her own decisions about her life. Since then, she has not talked to her family, and they did not find out the shocking truth for another 40 years. Hi and welcome back to Frozen in Time. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, as it helps us motivate to create more intriguing content for you. Let's have a look at the tragic story of Lynette Dawson. Lynette Joy Dawson was born in New South Wales, Australia, on May 5, 1948. She grew up with 2 brothers and a sister in a big loving family. They lived in the small town of Clovelly, which is basically a suburb of Sydney, with her parents. Lynette was a happy child who always tried to help her family and friends. Her folks thought that Sydney Girls High School was the best place for her, so they sent her there. The school often held events with Sydney Boys High School, and Lynette met Chris Dawson at one of these events in 1965. They were both 16 years old, and they started going out soon after. Lynette chose to become a doctor after she finished school. She decided to become a nurse because she wanted to help people. She also started working part-time at a daycare center. When Chris and Lynette turned 21, they chose to get married. In 1970, they tied the knot. The couple moved to Bayview, a neighborhood in the north of Sydney, where Lynette got a job at a hospital. Chris was very busy in sports, and since 1972, he has played rugby for a living. Paul, his twin brother, played sports with him on the same team. Later, they both quit their jobs and became coaches for physical education at one of Sydney's schools. Chris and Lynette wanted a big family, but it took them a long time to get pregnant. After trying for 6 years but not being able to have a child, they started to think about adopting a child from a shelter. But Lynette got pregnant in the end, and the couple had their first daughter, then their second. Lynette and Chris were glad to finally have kids, and theirs seemed like a great family to their friends and acquaintances. But soon, the first signs of trouble started to show up in this perfect scene. Lynette's friends began to notice that she had bruises and cuts on her body. Lynette said it was not a big deal when her friends asked her about it, so they should not worry. Even though Lynette's friends were worried about her, they did not think what was happening was that bad. Back then, many people in Australia did not think of domestic violence as a major crime. Also, everyone who knew Chris thought he was a loving husband and a good father who never got angry and was a good guy. So their friends did not try to fix their problems and tried not to get in the way of their marriage. But Lynette and Chris's relationship only got worse as time went on. Lynette noticed that her husband's feelings for her had changed, and she was worried about their family's future. They chose to hire a nanny a few years after their daughters were born. Chris told one of his 15-year-old students, Beth McNally, about this part-time job, but she did not stay in it for long. She saw Chris raise his hand twice to Lynette and chose to leave after that. Chris asked Joanne Curtis, one of his 16-year-old students, to do the job that Bev declined. Joanne's family had problems after a while, so Chris invited her to stay with them for a while so she could spend more time taking care of the kids until things got better at home. Even though Lynette is kind and wants to help people, she was against this. She was worried about the problems in their own family and did not want someone else to be there all the time. But Chris pushed on it, and Joanne moved in with them in October 1981. The young lady lived with them for about a month, until Lynette found out that her husband was sleeping with Joanne. It really surprised her, and it was another blow to their marriage. She kicked Joanne out but chose not to get a divorce from Chris. Lynette loved her husband despite what he did, and she wanted to keep her family together for the sake of their children. A few months later, on December 3, 1981, Lynette got another big surprise. Chris told her he was leaving the family in a note he left for her. He wrote that he and Joanne would move to another city and asked his wife not to tell the children bad things about him. This news broke Lynette's heart, but a few days later, she got another shock. Chris went back home because Joanne, who had planned to avoid him in another city, changed her mind and asked to be taken back. Meanwhile, Chris spent New Year's Eve with Joanne and left his wife and kids alone. Joanne moved into Chris's brother's house, which was on the same street at that time. Even though a lot of bad things were happening, Lynette wanted to keep her family together no matter what, so she chose to sign up for family therapy. Chris did not like this idea, but she was able to change his mind. She went to see the specialist right after New Year's, and it seemed like the treatment helped their relationship. Chris started spending more time with his wife and seemed to want to fix everything. Lynette called her mother on January 8, 1982, and told her that family treatment was going well. They also agreed to meet her and other family members the next day at a nearby beach. Her mother thought Lynette's speech was a little slurred, like she was drunk. The woman said that Chris had made her a drink that had booze in it. The next day, Lynette's family waited on the beach for her, but she never came. Chris told her that he had driven his wife to the bus stop that morning. They called her home. She was going to the store to bring back some clothes that did not fit, but she did not go back home, and her family began to worry. Chris called Lynette's mother in the evening to tell her that Lynette had called Chris. She said that because of problems in their marriage, she had chosen to spend some time away from home to think. Her family thought what was going on was strange, because they knew that the couple had been having problems for years. But they still could not picture Lynette leaving her two girls. She loved her kids more than anything else in the world, and never once said she was thinking about leaving. Lynette did not get in touch with her family for days, which made them fear even more. Chris told them on January 12 that Lynette had called their house and said she was fine. He had talked to her a few more times since then, and told her family that she had been using her bank card. Even so, her family still did not believe Lynette was okay. She did not know how to drive and did not bring anything that could help her make a living. She even hid some cash in case there was an emergency. In Australia, the school year starts in January, so Lynette's oldest daughter started first grade 3 weeks later. But Lynette did not go to this event, which made her family worry even more. They were almost sure that something bad had happened to her, but Chris said she still called home often, and the last time she did so was at the end of January. 6 weeks after Lynette left home, on February 18, her husband called the cops. He made a missing person report and said that he thought Lynette might have joined a religious group or even a cult because their marriage was so bad. Her family said that was not likely because Lynette was not religious and did not go to church. The cops had no clues. Lynette's mother and other family members were sure that she would never leave home and leave her girls behind. Because of this, they thought she had been kidnapped or that something else terrible had happened. Even so, the cops decided that Lynette had left home because they had no reason to think otherwise. They tried to find her for a while, but eventually gave up. Chris put a message in the local paper for Lynette, asking her to come home. He told her in the letter that he loved her and was looking forward to her call. He also called all of her friends to see if they knew anything about where his wife was. Even though Chris wanted to find Lynette, he got a divorce from her a year after she went missing. The next year, he married Joanne Curtis, a former student and lover who moved in with him the day after Lynette went missing on January 10, 1982. Joanne became the stepmother of Lynette's girls, and Chris told them that Joanne was their real mother because he did not want to scare them with stories about how their mother ran away. What was going on made Lynette's family unhappy, but they could not do anything about it. They stopped trusting the cops because they had stopped looking for clues a long time ago, because there were none. Also, they did not even try to talk to all of her family members and friends, and the case was dropped without a full investigation. Chris and Joanne took their kids and moved to Queensland. Before they left, they sold their old house. Chris stopped talking to almost all of his ex-wife's family members, only calling her mother once in a while. Chris and Joanne had a girl after a while. 6 years went by, and Lynette never talked to anyone during that time. This went on until something unexpected happened in 1990. Chris and Joan got a divorce, and soon after, Joan got in touch with Lynette's family to tell them some shocking news. She said that she had always thought that her husband had killed his ex-wife. She said that Chris had talked about getting a hitman to kill Lynette a month before she went missing. On the day she vanished, he told Joanne that Lynette had left forever and would never come back. She also told the cops to look in the backyard of Lynette and Chris's house. In 1991, cops questioned Chris. He said that his ex-wife was just trying to ruin his reputation and that he had nothing to do with Lynette's disappearance. He said that she was doing this on purpose to get custody of their daughter after they got a divorce. At the time, the court was choosing who would get custody of their child, and Joan would have benefited from Chris's arrest. Chris and his brother both had their phones taken by the police, but nothing strange was found. So detectives gave up on the case again because they did not believe what Joan said. The case went cold for another 9 years until the police chose to dig up Chris's old backyard in 2000. There was a catch, though. They only dug around the pool area because they did not have enough money. The police talked to the new homeowners and decided on this place. The only thing the cops managed to find was a torn pink cardigan. Investigators agreed that it could have belonged to Lynette and that it had some clues, but a DNA test showed that there was no match with Lynette. A year later, it came up again. This time, the deputy state prosecutor came to the conclusion that someone Lynette knew killed her. Police went back to the case and talked to her friends and family, but they did not find any new information. 2 years later, in 2003, investigators told the press that they thought Chris was a suspect. They wanted to charge him with murder, but they did not have any proof, so it did not happen. The guy could not be convicted, but investigators were able to find a lot of people who said Chris and his brother often had sexual relationships with students at their school. But no charges were made about this, so the case again stopped moving forward. In 2006, Chris said that he saw his wife as a background actor in an English TV show, but no one could find any proof to back up his claim. In 2010, the police offered a reward of $100,000 for information about what happened to Lynette. 4 years later, they doubled the award. Even though there were a lot of pleas, nothing came of it, and they did not find any good leads. When money is on the line, there are always a lot of people who want to make some extra cash. They are willing to lie about anything to get the money. In 2018, a podcast about Lynette's absence got a lot of attention in Australia. This was the turning point in the case. There were reasons why Lynette's husband should be the one who killed her. Several million people listened to the show, which made a lot of people angry. People in Australia said the police were not doing their jobs and asked that the person who did it be punished. Hadley Thomas, who made the podcast, talked to Lynette's family members to try to find new clues. Even though he could not find any new proof against Chris, the outcry from the public was enough to start a new investigation. So on December 5 of that year, police charged Chris with murder for the first time. He kept saying he was not guilty, and he was let out on bail before the hearing began. The trial went on for a long time. He went to court in 2019 and told the judge that he did not kill his wife and that the trial should have started in 2020. But Chris's lawyers kept pushing the process back. They claimed that their client was biased against them because of how much the media talked about the case. So they demanded that they ditch the jury and have a trial where the judge makes the choice. This request was granted in May 2022, and the trial could finally start. Chris's lawyers claimed that there was not a single piece of evidence against their client, and that all of the charges were based on prejudice because of the podcast. They said that the author wrote his opinion in a way that made many people think Chris was guilty and refused to evaluate the situation properly. Even though the prosecution did not have any direct proof, they built their case on a lot of indirect things. Family and friends of Lynette swore in court that they had seen signs of abuse on her body many times, and Lynette had told them that Chris was to blame. Their neighbors, who saw the man beating her, also told the court what they saw. They said that Lynette had bruises on her neck when she went back to family therapy the day before she went missing. Joanne, one of the most important witnesses, said that as she got older, she understood how bad her relationship with Chris was. When she was only 15, he became very interested in her. He would ask her out by putting notes in her school bag. He was persistent and would not take no for an answer. So the young woman felt like she had nowhere to go. Joanne said that Chris had total power over her life. He told her what to wear, whom to talk to, and what to do. He watched everything she did and could not stand it when things did not go the way he wanted. So, the woman came to the conclusion that the man could have killed his wife without much trouble. The prosecution says that Chris had wanted to stop the marriage for a long time, but that he could not because he would have lost some of his property and custody of the kids. So he chose to kill Lynette and make it look like she ran away. He also wanted her gone so she would not get in the way of his relationship with Joanne. On the other hand, Chris's lawyers claimed that Joanne had made all of this up to hurt her ex-husband. They also brought in several people who said they had seen Lynette years after she went missing. These stories became a big part of the defense, but there was no proof to back up what they said. The prosecution thought that these testimonies were made up and that Lynette would have kept in touch with her family and children over the years if she was still alive. As for the phone calls Chris supposedly got in the first month after she went missing, there was no proof that they happened. The prosecution said that the woman was already dead at the time and that the man made up everything to make Lynette's family think she was fine. They thought that Chris killed the woman on January 9, drove her body somewhere they did not know, and hid it because the cops were not doing their jobs properly. During those years, there was never a real investigation, even though the killer's reasons were always clear. After 10 weeks of trial, on August 30, 2022, the judge found Chris guilty. A few months later, at the beginning of December, the sentence was given: 24 years in jail, with the chance of getting out early after 18 years. Chris may not live to see that time because he will be 92 years old by then. After Lynette got her term, her family members spoke out, including her oldest daughter. She was sure that her father had killed her mother, and she said that he had ruined her life by doing so. The woman demanded that her father tell her where he had hidden Lynette's body so that the family could finally bury her. Chris stayed quiet and looked at the floor while his daughter talked. Even though Lynette has been dead for almost 41 years, her family still hopes to find her remains. Chris, who is now 74, keeps saying he is innocent, but not even his own children believe him. So, one of Australia's most well-known crimes was solved, thanks in large part to a podcast that brought this unfair story to the attention of millions of people. If the cops had done a good job from the start, the killer could have been caught and punished right away, not 40 years later. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you like this video, do not forget to click the like button. Thanks for watching.